Hello and welcome back to Wildcard Workshop. Today we're actually going to be building our first mod. We're going to take it from the state that it's currently in, which is just the basic minimum required files, and we're going to build that out into a mod that, if it were to be uploaded to the workshop, it would work. Now, as I mentioned before, this is going to be our Dino Shrine. It's just going to be a simple mod where we have a structure that spawns a dino, tracks when it dies, and when it does, it spawns a new one. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Diving right in to our first mod, our Dino Shrine, if you will. The first thing that we're going to need is a shrine, or at least a reasonable facsimile of one. So I recommend that when you start working with your mods, that you prototype them using existing assets, which is what we're going to do right now. In a future video, we might come back with custom assets for this, but for now, we're just going to work with things that are already in the dev kit. So to make our shrine, we want to create a blueprint. So you right-click in the content browser here, select blueprint, and I think something that can be relatively construed as a shrine would be a pillar, kind of like a totem-like thing, I suppose. So let's go ahead and pull open pillar, and we can make use of the Adobe pillar, actually. I think that'll work well. So we'll name it Dino Shrine BP. And you'll notice that it's already inherited everything from its parent, the Adobe pillar. It's got the mesh, it's got the materials, it has all of the settings and stats and everything and all of the parts of a structure already there. So we don't have to worry about any of that. We can just focus on adding our custom logic. To do that, we will want to create some variables first. Okay, we're going to create 6 variables. So I'm just going to pop them all down right here. Right? Yes, 6. All right. So the first one is we need to specify what the dino is that's going to be spawned by this shrine. So let's go dino spawn class. Okay. Yeah, so I didn't spell class right. There we go. And we need to specify a class limitation. So we can go primal dino character. By setting it to the primal dino character class, this variable right here will only accept values that are or inherit from the primal dino character class. So any children are valid, but any parents of primal dino character are not. Remember what we were talking about in the last video with inheritance and setting these types in variables. So we'll see that in action in this particular video. The next variable that we need will be a buff, because what I want it to do is spawn a buff with a particle effect on the dino once it's been spawned. Mostly just for aesthetics. This buff won't actually do anything in this case. We might make a custom buff in the future that does, but for right now, we're just getting the actual logic of the shrine in place. So we'll do spawn buff class. And for this one, we will set the type to primal buff. So any buff type classes can be put in here, any that inherit from primal buff. Next one is we want to specify how long between respawns. So we'll put respawn delay. And we'll make that a float, which is a decimal value. And then we want to do spawn x offset. This will also be a float, and that's going to drive me nuts if I don't fix that. and then we'll do spawn Y and spawn Z offsets. And I'll explain why I'm creating these as variables when we get to them, but it is pretty handy to do for being able to make quick adjustments during test. So we'll set U to float and U to float, and that's all the variables that we'll need for what we're doing. So now we've got our storage for data. Let's go ahead and create the logic that's going to use it. Let's create an event begin play node. Remember, I was talking about before, this is an actor, so we have all of these events that are already handled by the engine. This event begin play is fired when the actor is first constructed. Well, not constructed, after it's constructed, once it starts play in the game. So we've got that. And a good habit to build is if you're like using already existing BPs and you don't want to break their already existing functionality, when you use nodes like begin play or when you start messing with functions that already exist, right click on them, hit add call to parent function, and then pop it right there. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is when you call this, it's going to just flat out override any previous functionality that's called on those events and on those functions. And the stuff in the parents isn't actually going to get called at all. So to make sure that parent setup stuff is actually called, we call these parent nodes. In C++, we would use super, but in Blueprint, you just do add call to parent function. So we've got that. And on event begin play, this has helped fix many issues. We will put a retriggerable delay. Usually this happens, the issues that I'm talking about are things like actors not being fully instantiated or logic not being fully run through. This delay just gives a little bit of extra time for everything to get set up properly before things in your mod actually start trying to run. Now this next node is related to network code. We'll get a lot more into what these are for and how they work when we do our replication video. But for now, just know that for the most part, your mods are probably going to be used in multiplayer. So anything that's important code, you want to run on dedicated server and player server. And anything that's purely visual or purely aesthetic, you might want to run just on client. But anything important should run on the server, not the client. And we'll get more into why later on. But for now, just understand that this has to do with replication and controlling whether or not the server instance or the client instance is the one actually running the code. So after we've done that, we want to spawn class. Nope. Spawn actor from class. Now, you might remember in the last video, we did a construct object node to create that other particular blueprint that we made, but that was a blueprint deriving from object. We're going to be spawning a dyno, which derives from actor, and to construct one of those, we use the spawn actor node. So we've created that node, and we'll hook up our dyno spawn class. We'll feed its value into the class type. Right there. We're going to check spawn even if colliding, just so that it doesn't fail to spawn the creature just because the creature's too big for the space. And then we will want to set the transform. Now this is a bit of math, but it's not overly complicated. Your transform is the position. It's all of this data, your location, rotation, and scale. Location being a point in space where the origin of your actor is placed, the rotation being which direction it's facing, and the scale being how its size is being manipulated. So we're going to actually use the position of the structure, the Dino Shrine itself, to determine where to spawn our Shrine Dino. So we'll do, we want to do get actor transform. Now you'll notice I typed all that in there, but it's not showing up. Sometimes you just got to hit uncheck context sensitive to get things to show up that you need. Now we'll want to break this get actor transform. Sometimes we call this butterflying. I don't know why, but I guess it looks pretty with some of the larger ones that you might see. It's kind of a silly name though. Well, what we're doing here is we are getting the location data and we're modifying it. So a transform is a struct. It's a container for location, rotation, and scale data, and each one of these is also a container of data. And to break these, what I mean by opening up and getting that data is you just want to pull off the pin and type break, and you'll get a break for that type. And you will have access to the individual pins. And then to do the opposite, you can pull off of an input pin and you'll find make. So we have both of those. The rotation and scale we're just going to carry forward unmodified. But the location, we are going to make some minor modification to it. We're going to add in an addition node for floats. 2 more of them. I'm going to hook these up right here. And then whoops, didn't mean to do that. Then we will hook up our offsets. Okay, X, Y, and Z. So now, we've modified the spawn location of the dino, and I forgot to hook that up. Shame on me. Okay, so now we've modified the spawn location of the dino. Now we need to actually do something with it. So this pin right here is of type actor. Now we can't access all of the variables and functions that belong to the primal dino class unless we actually cast it to that type. So we want to type cast to primal dino character. And this also works to make sure that the type coming out of here is actually the type that we're expecting. If it's not, the cast will fail. So now we have this. Now the thing that we need is we need to bind to an event dispatcher. Okay? We're looking for bind event to onDied. Now an event dispatcher is something that you can make up here. And the best way to think of it is like a mailing list. You sign up for it by using these bind nodes, and then you tell it where to send that information when it's received. So, this event node right here is like an email address, and this is like signing up for the mailing list itself. Okay? So anytime that this particular reference of a dino dies, which should only be once, I would hope, but anytime that that is triggered, this node will be triggered as well. So what we want to do is we want to put in a delay. And to that delay, we want to hook up our respawn delay. And this will be the amount of time between when the dino dies before another one is spawned by the shrine. And then we just want to drag from this completed right back up to the start of the spawn actor, so it'll repeat. It'll spawn a creature, bind to the event when it dies. When it dies, it'll wait, and then spawn another one, and the process will repeat. Okay? Now, we want to kind of spruce up our dino a little bit and make it look fancy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an static add buff. And you have to turn off context sensitive to find it. But this will spawn a buff on an actor. So we'll take our spawn buff class and we'll hook that up to the buff class here. And then for character, we will hook up to our dino reference. We can actually leave these alone in this case. They're not required. And we will have attached a buff to the creature. So this should be all we need right now. The structure is created, and on the server, it will spawn a dino. The dino itself is replicated, so the clients will receive that information, but the actual act of spawning it only occurs on the server, as does the binding and the addition of buffs. So now that we've got this set up, we're going to save it. We're going to compile. And then we're going to pop over here to the defaults. And you'll see all of our variables are right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our dino class. I kind of like the idea of using a turtle for it, because why not? Let's go with, let's use the aberrant turtle. And then for the buff, I want to use the Leopleurodon buff. So what I'm going to do, because I don't know where that file is, I just know that it exists, I'm going to select the root game folder here, and I just type buff L, buff underscore L. And there it is, buff Leopleurodon magic. And this is mostly just for aesthetic. In the future, we might make a custom buff that actually does something of benefit. But for right now, we're just gonna make it look fancy. So the delay for respawn, we will go ahead and use 10 seconds. And the X, Y, and Z offset, we're going to leave X as 0, Y as 200, and Z as 150. Now these variables were just something that I tested around with earlier to see what would work well. Depending on the creature that you use, you're going to have to use different ones. So now that we've got that set up, and you'll notice I didn't have to compile again after setting these variables. If you have a variable and you set its values in the defaults, you do not have to compile if you change them. But if you have, for instance, if I unhook this node here, if I unhook the variable from here and I fill in that value manually in the graph, if I change its value here, I would have to recompile. So that's what I was saying earlier about it being easier for quick testing and iteration of changes, is making those variables can make things a lot easier when you have to constantly make changes here, pop over to play in editor, try it out, go back, change it, try it out, go back, change it. That can get very time consuming if you have to compile every time. So now that we've set our values, we'll start. Oh, there we go. Turtle has already spawned. The first one looks all fancy with its sparkles. And if we kill it, oh, poor turtle, in a few seconds we should see right about, boom, new turtle. And we can just keep doing that, and it'll keep respawning turtles with fancy sparkles. That's it. That's our Dino Shrine. That's the core logic that drives it. Wasn't all that difficult, right? But it was kind of cool. And we can polish it and make it fancier later on. So for now, the Shrine BP is done. But we can't really use this in-game as is, because this is not a map mod. So we can't just make it in the map. We need to hook this into the game through the normal mod methods, the normal hooks that the devs have given us for adding new structures. So let's do that. So we need a couple more blueprints. The first one is a primal item structure BP. Okay, so we go primal item structure, Adobe, pillar. Nope, these are for a different one. Adobe pillar. Primal item structure, Adobe pillar. Yep. And this is the actual item that sits in your inventory. So it's best just to name them with the same convention so that you don't get confused on what they are. So start it with primal item structure, and then we'll do Dino Shrine. Okay. And we'll save that. And then we also need to create the Engram blueprint so that it's actually learnable. And we'll right click again, with blueprint, and we will go Engram entry, Adobe pillar. Yep, Adobe pillar. Select. We'll do Engram entry Dino Shrine. And there we go. So how do we hook these up? We do that by first opening up our Dino Shrine again. Just open all three blueprints. So you're going to need to make changes to all three still. First one is we'll select the primal item structure. We'll hit find in content browser to select it. This is a quick way if you've got a bunch of blueprints open and you need to actually select them in the content browser, you can hit find in CB and it'll automatically just move to it. Really handy. We'll go back to the Dino Shrine BP. And what we want to find is the variable that determines what item is consumed when the structure is placed. There we go. Consumes primal item. Select that and we'll just pop that in right there. Alternatively, if you know the name of a variable, you can just type it in up here. Or if you know part of the name, you just type it in there and it'll show it. So set that there. We will do another find in CB. Swap back over to the primal item structure blueprint. And we're going to type in structure to build. Pop that in right there. Then we want to select the primal item structure again. Go to the Engram entry. And in blueprint entry, we want to put right there. Engram group, I'm just going to put arc prime for making it available across all maps. These decide limitations for what map you need to be on in order to learn the engram. For level, we're just going to set it to 1. And for points, we're just going to set it to 1. Okay. Now, let's go look at the crafting requirements real quick. Resource. So right now, we just want to make it easy for testing. So we're going to delete that one. We're going to delete that one. We're going to leave it on thatch, and we're just going to set it to 1. And save. Now we want to open up the Primal Game Data BP. We want to select our Engram entry. We want to move down to... So not typing. There we go. Ooh, hi. Not Engram blueprint classes, but we want to use additional Engram blueprint classes. We'll add one element to that. Oh, don't do that to me. Add one element to that array, and then we'll fill it in with our Dino Shrine engram. And then additional structures to place. We want to add one more element to that as well. We want to go to the Dino Shrine BP, the actual actor, that one. And then we want to fill it in there. And this should make it possible to craft and place our entire structure. So now what we want to do, and this, I know I said before we don't want to change the test map, but when we're testing, and we're testing like things like the engrams, what we want to do is we want to select our primal game data. And in the test map, we want to come down here to primal game data override and set that. We want to clear that before we shut down the kit, but we need to set it for testing purposes. So we'll save that real quick, and then we will play. And then I'm going to do admin sheet GM buff. Now that we are in, we want to, and now that we've got levels, we want to open up our inventory, add a level so that we've got some engram points over here. And, oh, I've messed up. I forgot some things. See, this is the importance of testing. It's easy to forget things. So let's shut that down. We will come back to the engram entry. Engram requirement sets. See, there's something hidden in there. Adobe Floor. We can just clear that. We don't want any requirements. So now that that's there, let's go over here and make another change, because you'll notice it still said Adobe Pillar. So we want to go to name. Dino Shrine. And then description. And these are pretty important because otherwise players aren't going to know what it's for. So give it a name and we'll give it a description. Spawns a sparkly dino that revives itself when it dies. There. A little bit of flavor text. And we'll try it again. So again, we're in. I will give myself some experience. Open up the inventory. Add a level. Engrams. And oh, there it is. Dino Shrine. And it's learnable. There we go. So can we craft it? This is the next big question. We cannot because we don't have any thatch. I thought there was thatch in the default test inventory. My bad. So for the sake of simplicity, let's just change that real quick. Oops, wrong one. Okay, see, I messed up. I clicked on the drop down and I had to sit here and wait a couple minutes, waiting for it to load. The better way to do this is to just find it in the actual content browser. Let's see, we want wood. And just fill it in like that. Much faster. Much less annoying. Alright, so one last try. Get in. Add experience. Level up. Engram. Learn. And then we want to craft it. Look at that. There it is. And it is somewhere in yep, there it is. Alright, Dino Shrine spawns a Sarkly Dino. Well, I'll fix that in post. Not really. Places, and there's the dino. Just immediately. So this will work in game now. When we cook our mod and it gets used, it would just work like that. And there we have created our first functionally usable mod. It's not very fancy, doesn't do anything particularly useful, but it works. And it shows you how to do some of the in-game specific actions, like working with dinos, or dealing with engrams and the inventory items, because the inventory items, like you saw, are completely separate from the actual structure that is spawned. And that's it. From there, you can polish that, make it fancy, do whatever you like, test it out. We will cover uploading to the workshop in another video. I know I might have said that we were going to do it in this one, but this took a little bit longer than I anticipated. But we will do it later on, and I'd like to put a little bit more custom polish on it before we actually upload it anyways. So we covered the entire process for getting a structure into the game by hooking into the Arc Dev Kit's already built-in hooks that were provided to us by the development team. And then getting that to do all of the things that we want to do without actually having to add things to the map. So it's all done programmatically when the game starts. There are other systems for getting other types of items and creatures and things like that into the system. And we'll cover more of those as we go through and we do some more of these little mods as we build out different systems to exemplify how some of this works. And you can get a much better idea of how to take these things that we're building in these videos apart and do your own stuff. And that's what I'm hoping, is that all of these little mods that we make will provide you enough information that you can take them apart and do your own ideas with them, and that you'll understand how each of the pieces fit together. In the next video, we're going to cover a very big topic, and that is replication. This is a very important topic for multiplayer in UE4. And I know we've referenced it a couple times and didn't go into it. And that's because it is sort of its own beast with a lot of different rules and systems already in place for managing it. So the next video, we're going to actually go in and we're going to break all of that down. We're going to demystify replication. And you'll find out that it's actually a lot more simple than it sounds. It's not the gigantic monster that it looks to be when you first start reading about replication. There's just a lot of different little rules that you have to be careful of. But once you know them, you'll be good to go. So until next time, happy modding.